Welcome everyone to another edition to As Above, So Below Radio. I'm your host, Martin Hodgson, and it gives me great pleasure to have you tuning in today. When you get a chance, please visit the website holisticadvocate.com. For any updates on news as well as interviews, please visit my blog. Also, take a moment to subscribe and become a member. Not only will you gain access to the commercial-free, subscriber-based interviews, but also treat yourself to an assortment of fascinating people worth listening to. Today's guest is Patricia Cori. Having began her inception into the New Age movement since the 1970s, Patricia has not only brought forth her clairvoyant abilities to help heal others, but has also studied mysticism, philosophy, ancient civilizations, metaphysical healing, spirituality, and unexplained mysteries. Aside from being a prolific author, a teacher, a spiritual guide, and an enthusiastic speaker, Patricia is also a dedicated activist in helping raise public awareness concerning the plight of marine animals. Join me in welcoming Patricia as she discusses the plight of the cetaceans. First of all, Patricia, I'd like to extend to you a warm welcome for being on As Above, So Below Radio. Now, before we begin, I'd like to point out that among the books you've written, I believe, what, 12 books so far?
Yeah, this is my 13th.
13, fantastic. That you're also an enthusiastic speaker, a teacher, you're also a radio host. And now you're also a screenwriter, is that correct?
It is. My book, The Emissary, was first written as a screenplay. I woke up one morning and said, it's time to write a movie because it's time to reach out to greater numbers of people. We've got to be talking to the masses now. And I believe that since the mainstream media isn't going to do it, then the vehicle is film. So I wrote the screenplay first, and it got picked up and optioned and is now in development to become a major motion picture. And then I wrote the novel. I did it backwards.
Wow. Okay. Now, it's my understanding that that there's some A-list actors lined up for The Emissary. Is that correct?
Well, the producer wants to make it a blockbuster type of film. So I can't give the names out, but they are looking at A-list director and A-list actors. And their job, in development means finding a way to put a package together. In other words, it's kind of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg, because the financiers want to know who's attached to the film, who's the director. The actors want to know who the director is. The director doesn't want to have the actors chosen before him because he wants to do that. And so it's kind of like racing around trying to get that first involvement. And that has been accomplished. So we're well on our way, and fingers crossed it could be, hopefully by the end of the year, we could be in production. But they are looking at A-list actors. Yes, absolutely.
That's fantastic. That's great. I wish you all the best and all the best of luck in producing this film here. Okay, so let's reserve The Emissary for the second hour here, because in perspective, this book, though different in its storyline, incorporates a central theme, and that it deals with the cetaceans. So you've written a book called Before We Leave You. And that's an unusually prophetic title for a book. Can I ask why you chose this title, Patricia?
The title kind of chose me, and that is because I started hearing messages from the whales and dolphins because I'm an animal communicator as well as channeling the six-dimensional beings that you know as the Syrian High Council. And I started hearing these pleas. Please help us before we leave you. We need you. We need help from you. We need for you to listen to our message before we leave you. And I had some very deeply emotional moments where I was hearing these pleas and feeling the suffering and feeling like I was drowning in the middle of the ocean with these frenzied whales and dolphins. And these events would happen, and then I would find out later that at the same time that I was hearing the messages, whales and dolphins were beaching somewhere around the world. So it comes as a poignant cry from the whales and dolphins themselves.
Now, I believe you stated that you were conducting a workshop in Jordan back in 2008. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that was when it first started happening. Would you like me to tell that story?
Of course, yes, by all means.
Well, I was teaching a workshop there, and I had about 150 people in the room, and none of these people knew me, so they didn't really know how I teach. They didn't necessarily understand my humor. And in the middle of this, I started hearing, I mean, I'm standing in front of a group of people talking about DNA, and I hear, please help us, help us. And I thought it was very strange. And the problem with being a psychic is that so many times what you hear or see is not something you turn on, as you can imagine. It's not like you go to a psychic fair and say, okay, I'm open now, I'm going to do readings. It is sometimes spontaneous, and you don't necessarily know where it's coming from, or you've got to get a handle on it. And that's hard to do when you're standing in front of people teaching. So I kept hearing this call, and I was very upset because I didn't know how to deal with it. I was frozen, and I just called the class to a break and ran out of the room and tried to pull myself together. But I could see myself in the middle of the ocean with a pod of whales who were frenzied and ready to die. And this was a very, very difficult thing. And later that day, at the end of the class, I went back to my hotel room and turned on the news, and sure enough, at the time, more or less, because they didn't identify the specific hour or minutes on the news, but basically at the time I was experiencing that, 150 whales had beached themselves, whales and dolphins, had beached themselves in New Zealand. So this began a trend where every month or so I was having these experiences of finding myself in the middle of these desperate calls. And I finally said out loud, please, if you want me to help me, give me more information. I can't bear this pain. I don't know what to do for you. And that was the beginning of receiving channeled messages that resulted in the book Before We Leave You.
Now, you mentioned that they beached themselves. Are we talking about like mass suicide, basically?
Yes, we're talking, well, now there will be a lot of debate about that. And there have been people who have said to me, how ridiculous, animals don't commit suicide. And I'm like, really? Well, for starters, we're animals and we commit suicide. So how dare you make such a blanket statement? But animals, why wouldn't they commit suicide? I mean, isn't it the black widow spider? Which one is the one that...
the black widow is a female.
Yeah, and she, doesn't she eat her... Which one is the one that...
Well, the black, with the black widow, it's the female spider that has the red marking. And after she
eats her mate.
Yeah,
after. Well, I can't think of the animal, the insect in question that commits suicide in some act. So let's just forego that for a moment. But the point of the question, whether or not the dolphins and whales commit suicide, I would like to suggest that one of the reasons why this happens is because they are experiencing excruciating sound. Our oceans are full of excruciating sonar tests, explosions. I mean, we're still doing nuclear explosions in the oceans. We've got now we've got every kind of bomb, and they're dropping bombs for tests. They're exploding bombs in the ocean, and new, very powerful sonar and another little number called the gun array system. To
Mm.
make it brief, there is an extraordinary amount of noise pollution in the ocean, and some of these noises are so excruciating to the whales and dolphins that, in my opinion, they are simply trying to get out of the water to escape it. I use this analogy when I talk to people of, imagine if you're sitting having a nice dinner with your family and a fire engine comes screeching into your kitchen and the siren is blasting. The first thing you would do is run away because your ears will explode, right?
Right. I mean, the dogs hear it every time and they
Exactly.
howl every time they hear an ambulance or a fire truck passing by.
Yeah, people think they howl because they're imitating the sound, but they're also howling because it's painful.
Right.
And
Right.
in the case of the whales and dolphins, who have the most extraordinary oral cavities in their brain, in their heads, this is also pressure. This is extraordinarily painful. In fact, many of them are washing up with blood coming out of their blowholes, out of their ears and mouths. And we believe that this is caused by some sort of extreme explosion or sonar drills that are literally blowing their brains out.
You know, it's interesting that you stated noise pollution, but it's beyond that. It's regular pollution, chemicals in the ocean and so forth. I'm going to get further into this interview with the fact that we literally are killing the oceans, you know?
We
Uh,
are.
yeah, with
We are very quickly, I might add, degrading. In the last 10 years, the degradation of our oceans has been an extraordinary spike. However, back in the days of Jacques Cousteau, I think 30 years ago, he said 90% of our oceans are dead.
that was 30 years ago.
Yeah,
Can you imagine?
yeah. I mean, he might have overstated the case, but we are looking at a very dramatic situation in the ocean. And if people don't believe that, they need to look up dead fish and find out that everywhere around this planet, thousands and thousands, even millions of fish are washing up dead every day.
Right.
So
Right.
something very dramatic is happening, and we need to pay attention.
Yeah, and what's really pathetic is that the media, at least the mainstream media, you know, they turn a blind eye when it comes to this reality. I mean, how can they ignore the fact that starfish are melting? Um, there's some fishes or some sea mammals that are literally dying and washing up ashore on some of the beaches here. And, you know, their response is, oh, this is just a natural cycle for these sea mammals. When it's obvious that, you know, they don't want to use the R word, radiation from
Yeah, we
Fukushima.
don't go there, do
You
we?
don't go there. Absolutely not.
I go there. I do. And the thing is that even spiritual people don't want to talk. It's not just the mainstream media. Very few people want to talk about it because it's very frightening.
Hmm.
And we are overwhelmed with frighteningly bad news on this planet. And yet, I don't get how things are going to get better by simply ignoring them. And in a way, I just can't help but believe that the powers that be love the fact that spiritual people only want to think about positive things and positive mindset, and that in a way that's very empowering to the people that are running the show here.
Hmm.
So I do want to talk about these things, and I do put myself out there as much as possible to talk about every aspect because I believe that we can change it when we start to wake up to it. And of course, this is the big debate. When are we going to wake up and take charge of healing this planet?
Right. Okay, now you've also stated that the cetaceans are considered the ambassadors of the galaxy. Is that correct?
I have.
Okay, so where do we, or where do these beings originally come from? I mean, it's my understanding that there's a connection with Cirrus. Is that correct?
Serious? Well, I I believe that actually whales and dolphins exist on many planets in
Mm-hmm.
many star systems, and in probably in other universes and parallel realities, because let's face it, we realize more and more
Uh-huh.
that there is a commonality of life forms. There has to be, by nature of the essence of life, be similar life forms elsewhere. And when we talk it now, they're openly talking about Europa and the water there and Mars. And, for goodness sakes, I'm sure that on other planets there are similar life forms to life forms on this planet.
Hmm.
However, I understand from my own experience working with the council that the whales and dolphins are ambassadors for many galaxies, and that they are, let's say, the whales and dolphins are highly developed, highly conscious beings, and it's my understanding that they are from other dimensions, higher dimensions, and that they serve as not only ambassadors, but as, let's say, go-betweens or envoys of light to help hold the music of the planetary bodies in balance. And they certainly are doing that on this planet, or at least they're attempting to. If we just stop interfering, their work on this planet, besides looking like just happy-go-lucky, wonderful, jumping spirits, is to weave sound through the oceans. They weave light doing that. Their calls, their music has a purpose. It's not just for mating. It's not just for dancing or hunting. It has to have a greater purpose by the nature of the fact that humpback whales' calls can reach 1,000 miles or more away. Now, that precludes any discussion of hunting or mating. And it's my belief that they're communicating with dolphins and whales particularly now, and sending that musical information to them, and then a relay of that information, because those whales pick up that frequency and then continue to send it on. And I think they're weaving a symphony around this planet, around the oceans of the planet, and that has everything to do with holding the emotional balance of the planet, which is, of course, the water.
That's a very interesting analogy because I'm guessing that this would be similar to the birds, and that the birds weave their song through the air to help awaken nature, in the early morning and so forth. Could this be one of the reasons why they're being hunted down? Because, basically, as you stated, they're weavers of music of the oceans. So, in effect, they're helping to keep the seas in balance.
Yes, my understanding, and you call me a conspiracy theorist, although I prefer to be called a conspiracy realist, is that there is a deliberate attempt to destroy this planet and to silence the music of this planet and to just bring us down to the lowest denominator of existence. So everything that is beautiful and musical and pure and innocent seems to be prey to whatever force it is that wants to silence that and destroy the love, destroy the beauty. And I think there's a deliberate intention to silence and destroy the whales. I do.
Okay. Now, I got to ask you this. When you took the plunge, no pun intended here, to get close to the dolphins, you had your anxieties, right? I mean, first it was getting close to them, and second, swimming in the ocean. Can you describe this experience?
Yes, anxiety is definitely the word. I have always been afraid of the ocean, and it's one of those primordial fears that you don't understand where it comes from. But as a child, well, I think it comes from Atlantis and memories of Atlantis, because as a child I had horrific fear of going over any bridges. I would just create such a hysteria that my mother just could not understand what the problem was.
Same
And
here.
I think we discussed that the last time I was with you, didn't we?
We could have.
I
Yeah,
think
I believe we did. Yeah. Yeah.
because I talked about it in my book Atlantis Rising, and I believe, if I recall right, you said that you were, when you read that, you were like, "Whoa, I have this too." But
Mm.
I I for the longest time, um, they had to put a blanket over my head to get me over the bridges, and we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. There are many bridges to get from one part to the other, and so I've had that fear. And then um, when I was a teen, a young woman died of a shark attack in Santa Cruz, where close to where I lived. So I had this vague fear of the ocean. And one day I said, "Well, Pat, the dolphins are in the ocean. And I don't want to swim in cages with dolphins. I want to know them. I want to experience them in the wild. So you're going to have to take this leap." And I went to the Azores Islands and I hooked up with a company that does tours and dolphin tours. And I hired the boat for a few days, just me, and went out. And the funny, it really, when I think about it, the insanity of going out on a little pontoon boat. And the Azores Islands are right in the middle of the the North Atlantic Ocean. This is not on the coast. You can't, this is rough ocean.
Right. Right. Hmm.
So I'm out there in the wild ocean on this little boat, suited up with the ridiculous scuba, at least the suit. I was in a snorkel mask. And I looked out, and as far as I could see, as far as the eye could see, I saw fins. I saw the occasional jumping dolphin, but by and large, I saw fins. And I said to the captain, "You have got to be crazy if you think I'm going to jump into an ocean full of fins." He said, "Well, they're dolphins." I said, "How do you know that? How do you know the difference between a shark fin and a dolphin fin?" So he explained it to me. And he said, "Besides, so sorry, sharks don't usually, the word is usually here, swim with dolphins."
Right.
And I said, "Usually?" And so when it's unusually, do they do it?
Right. Right.
Because, I don't want to be in the odds department of the unusual behavior. And he laughed and he said, "Patricia, you've traveled far to come here and swim with the dolphins." He said, "There's about 150 bottlenose dolphins out there. Now jump in." And I was faced with the greatest terror I think I've ever known in my life. And I've done plenty of wild things, as anyone who's heard of me or seen some of my stuff will know. But this was the max, and I really grappled with terror, utter terror. And then finally he said, "Patricia, you came here to," and I said, "Okay, okay, okay," and I jumped in and was blessed and rewarded with the most extraordinary experience of all these bottlenose dolphins. And they didn't leave me. When you're in the wild with dolphins, they come by, they check you out, they swim around, they go. But they stayed with me for 2.5 hours,
Wow.
swimming with me, talking to me, playing. It was something beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Life altering.
So they were checking you out, basically, huh?
Oh, they were. When I first jumped in, there were two sentinels that came up, and they sort of, it looked like they weren't even moving. They were just parked right in front of me.
Hmm.
And then I started to feel this ping, these pings on my body. And I still don't know if that was a psychic thing or if everybody feels it, but I felt it. It was like little darts almost on my uh, body, up and down. And I realized they were, I shouldn't say darts because that's going to make people think it was painful, and it wasn't. It was just strong.
Right.
Um, and I realized they were doing some sort of balancing or some kind of a healing, or just perhaps just probing to decide who I was, what was my energy, and was I going to be allowed into the pod.
Yeah, I think they could have been sonaring you. Most
Uh-huh.
dolphins do, usually do that. I want to point out here that um, Joan Ocean, if you're familiar with her, she
Absolutely.
also, yeah, she also had the same anxieties when she was invited by the dolphins to go swim with them. And the fact that, you're going into the ocean, You look down, it's not like being in a pool where you see the bottom of a pool. You look down at the ocean, this practically goes into infinity. And, she had those same anxieties.
In fact, that's an interesting point. At no time in our lives, most of our lives, do we
Hmm.
have that sense of vertical, because we have a floor beneath, we have the earth, we have the ground, the floor, or whatever beneath us, and very rarely do we have opportunities where there's simply nothing beneath you. Even if you're in an elevator and you're up 17 floors, there's still the elevator floor under your feet, right?
Right.
So being in the water, one of the first things that I experienced, because I have never been in the deep before, was this extraordinary sense of this vertical consciousness of knowing that the floor was possibly 2 miles down. And I
Yeah.
was just suspended there, not at the mercy of the ocean, but definitely, let's say, at the mercy of the ocean. And it is a it's not even just frightening. It's a new sensation. It's something that really startles you, especially when you look down and you see that these dolphins are coming up from beneath you. And
Right.
that first experience was
Overwhelming.
just so new, overwhelming, so new. So many aspects about it are so huge. And nothing, I think, I've gone again and again, and nothing will ever rival that first encounter and all of those experiences, like Joan said, of that sense of the depth of it, the immensity of it, the expanse of it, the distance of the land. You know that you are completely at the will of the ocean. It's a lot about surrender as well. And
Absolutely.
that's where the rewards are.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know for a fact that the cetaceans, they've been here far longer than humanity ever populated the planet. Would it be safe to maybe speculate that they're associated with the Dogon?
Well, yes, thank you for that. The Dogon tribes described beings coming out of a craft, going and landing in the water, and then coming out of the water, walking up to them, and looking like half fish, half men, and telling them they were they were the Nomo, and they
Hmm.
were from Sirius, and we have understood and that they were here for millions of years, and the well, let me think. That wouldn't make sense, would it, if they said that the Dogon were, I guess it was their ancestors.
Right, right.
It was their ancestors, yes, pardon
Hmm.
me for that. But I I do believe that the whales and dolphins have been in this ocean, in our oceans, from as far back as Atlantis, and perhaps much, much longer, perhaps millions of years. But
Hmm.
if we embrace the idea that Homo sapiens is a genetically designed species, which is what I bring forward in the Syrian Revelations, that is relatively new. We're one of the relatively new species on this planet. Then I think it's safe to assume that the whales and dolphins are way, way before us.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay, now you wrote this book before we leave you, years before the Fukushima disaster. So it's prophetic in a way that in reading a passage you cited that the cetaceans urged you to help them because according to them, the oceans of the earth are in fact dying. And I want to point out some facts here with regard to the R word, the radiation, that the mainstream media just refuses to acknowledge here. Starfish have been observed to have melted. Let's see, there's a huge spike in the death rate of killer whales off the coast of British Columbia. Polar bears, seals, and walruses along the Alaskan coastline are suffering from fur loss and open sores. Sea lions have been seen dying along the California coast. Experts have found very high levels of cesium-137 in plankton living in the waters between Hawaii and the West Coast. And one test in California found that 15 out of 15 bluefish tuna were contaminated with radiation. And let's not also forget the fact that these cetaceans are being hunted down, and slaughtered or captured and trained to entertain the masses at venues such as SeaWorld. So the fact remains that radiation is affecting the sea life in the Pacific Ocean, right?
It's very dramatic, and I really have been out there beating the drum and telling people, if you're still eating seafood, you better get a handle on reality.
Right.
For starters, there's another element, and that is the fish, the dolphins, and the whales are being found so full of plastic. A lot of them are dying from the plastic. Recently, a sperm whale was washed up on the coast off of Washington, and when they cut it open, because it was expanding, like when an animal dies, the gas starts to make the body swell. Right. They just found pounds and pounds of plastic in this whale's stomach. Birds are being found, gulls are full of plastic. So the big problem here, another big problem, the radiation we won't even discuss. This is a very grave, grave situation for the whole planet, but particularly the Pacific Ocean. But that's not to say that it's going to stop there. I mean, of course, it's going to continue to spread. But if you're still eating seafood, you need to really inform yourself about what's going on. When you've got starfish just disintegrating into mush, it's been described.
Right.
And in Marina del Rey, when I was in the States last month, 70,000 fish just floated up dead on the shore in Marina del Rey, in a popular beach area. And the mainstream media, I love this. I just love it. I mean, this was all at once. 70,000 fish one morning were dead on the coastline. The mainstream media said probably there was a predator and they were all trying to get away from the predator, and they got crowded into a contained area, and there wasn't enough oxygen in the water. Now, if that isn't denial about the reality of the situation on this planet, I don't know what is. So,
and what's sad is that people tend to, at least some people, they tend to believe that.
Well, yeah, the majority of people on this planet still believe what they're fed as their daily bread from the government, from their teachers, from their news reporters, and the rest of us who are trying to bring the truth through are considered conspiracy theorists. But all you need to do is really think about it. Does it make sense in nature that 70,000 fish, a school of fish that big, what kind of predator are we talking about? The Loch Ness Monster?
Right.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. So people wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
Okay, well, Patricia, what's your perspective on these venues such as SeaWorld? I believe a couple of years ago, one trainer was killed, they state, by an orca whale. I know that I've gone to SeaWorld myself years ago, and from my perspective, they look happy. They're being fed fish, daily. But I guess you can say that like a circus, some of the animals may go berserk because, let's face it, if you're a killer whale and you're pretty much living in an existence in a tank for what, 10, 15, 20 years, that's like saying, to a human, hey, go live in a bathtub for 10 or 15 years and see if you don't go crazy, right?
Indeed. Well, for starters, most of the people are going crazy because the kind of confinement and captivity with such limited space for any living being is unhealthy mentally and spiritually and emotionally. But in the
Right.
case of animals like whales, these are migratory animals. They travel great distances. That's part of their existence, is to migrate. And then they are community animals. They live together in pods. Their lives are about community. So, and if you agree with my earlier statements about the music, they are here to do something very beautiful for this planet, to sing their music, to journey through the waters, to speak to the water, even on a very esoteric level. I believe that the messages from the whales and dolphins, the music that they produce, helps keep the water molecules in their highest integrity and spirit. So putting them, these beautiful, giant, migratory, free beings into a little swimming pool and teaching them how to jump and leap and play and dance and catch the fish and spray a bunch of popcorn-eating, ignorant humans for fun, to me is such an abuse of power and such an ignorant thing to do that I become very aggravated, as you can tell by me speaking now,
Right.
about the fact that we don't seem to get that this is unacceptable. Just like chaining elephants to a circus act, or beating lions, or any of this, treating animals like actors, like clowns, to perform for us is no less vulgar and violent than the days of the Romans and the gladiators fighting to entertain the noblesse oblige in Rome. And yet we have a disdain for that. The idea, oh my God, we make movies about that, how horrible, but we do it.
Right. Matter of fact, there's a movie that was produced called Blackfish.
Yes,
And what's really sad here is that most of these orca whales are corralled. When they're very young, they're separated from their mothers. So the shock in being pulled away from your mother, and all of a sudden you're in a strange environment surrounded by humans that yeah, they feed you and so forth, but you're in effect you're pulled away from your environment, from your surroundings, from your home, so to speak. So there's that shock, that resentment, so to speak, in the animal. And when you look at it from a higher perspective, it kind of makes sense why these animals would just go berserk and attack these trainers.
definitely. A lot of these animals also watch their pods being killed because
Hmm.
very often they snatch the perfect specimen and then they slaughter the others. So there's that terror. And it's not just the mother, it's they, unlike us, these animals stay together. They live in these pods. Usually they stay in these same pods all their lives. So that estrangement is utterly foreign to the nature of the being. In the case of the woman who got killed, I'm not sure that the orca attacked her. He grabbed her by the foot and brought her down into the bottom of the water, of the
Hmm.
pool.
Right.
And he may very well have thought he was playing, because they jump on their backs of these animals. I mean, they're all over these poor animals, right? They
Right.
ski on them, they stand up on them and do all these ridiculous acts. So he may have thought he was playing with her.
Unintentionally.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
regardless, whatever it was, the guilt of that incident is not the whale. It is the criminals that are holding these animals imprisoned in these horrific places, and it needs to stop. And thank goodness that movies like that are coming out and are having a significant impact. Blackfish is having a significant impact on SeaWorld.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to transition here into a very disturbing topic, Patricia. Can you go into detail how the U.S. Navy is using sound to kill these cetaceans?
Well, it's a stretch to say that their purpose is to kill them, and I think that we both need to be cautious. Although I know that I've come out and said that the intention of the Navy
Hmm.
officially
Hmm.
is to do war games, war tests, testing equipment, and it is an all-out assault on the ocean, but supposedly it is to, of course, keep our borders safe. Well, everybody seems to have the same idea because it's not just the U.S. that's doing this. The British Navy's doing the same thing. And I'm sure all around the planet, the navies of different countries are testing this equipment. Sonar, some kind of new electronic device called laser sonar, which I have no idea what that is, and bombs, explosions, chemicals. I mean, it's just warfare time on the ocean.
Right.
These sonar exercises that they're doing, supposedly to be able to to know if anything is in the waters, are now going to be conducted in a new 5-year program where all holes are barred. There's no more marine sanctuary. There's no more protected sacred sanctuaries. It's carte blanche. And what the hubbub is all about is that the Navy has said we do realize that there will be incidents where we may do harm. That's part of unfortunately, that's we'll do our best, but that's collateral damage in order to keep you safe. But there has been mention of the possibility of up to 12 million takes, which they describe as maiming, hurting, blinding, deafening, or killing marine mammals. Now, I have come out and said that, is it more than that? Is it more than collateral damage? Are they actually trying to destroy the music of our planet? Is there actually an intention to destroy these beings as some sort of berserk plan to silence the music? And I leave that to the listener to question.
You mentioned that, I heard you mention that, these cetaceans dying were basically considered collateral damage. Um, in effect, they're just casualties of war. I mean, there is a declared war against these cetaceans. And I'm not going to hold anything back here. Um, it's my perspective and my opinion that there is a declared war against the sea mammals. And I also believe that in conjunction, um, I believe the U.S. Navy is working, let's say, with the secret government, whether people wish to believe in it, but I believe there is uh, some kind of working here to annihilate these cetaceans because, in effect, they hold the key to our ascension.
I agree with you, Martin, and they also may very well be and this is something that we'll talk about with the emissary when we talk about that in the next hour. They are also in contact with higher consciousness ETs,
Hmm.
and that is not desired by the darker forces, where we know that there is a secret government. And we know there's a secret government because even the President of the United States doesn't have clearance, right?
Right.
There are, I don't know how many degrees security clearance above the President of the United States. So we know there's something going on here. If that's not a secret, I don't know what is. So it's my understanding that there is a deliberate intention to destroy these emissaries, and in so doing, to lower the frequency of the planet.
You know, it's interesting you cite the fact that there are um, interactions with ETs and the cetaceans. Matter of fact, I had heard an interview with Joan Ocean, and she stated that a while back when she was diving in the waters around Hawaii, that she had seen this huge blob, glowing blob in the water, and she had went into this blob, and to her it felt like it was a totally different environment. And yeah, she just stated in effect that ETs are interacting with the cetaceans, and I believe that these forces, negative forces, just don't want that to happen.
Well, this is certainly a perfect place to segue into the emissary. I don't want to direct the interview, but that is very much what the emissary is about.
Mm.
And if you're willing, I really would love to bring that in at the moment, because this is we're right in the subject matter of that story.
Okay, well, before we go there, would you mind if we segue into a different part here? It deals with a I'm going to go from the frying pan into the fire here, if you don't
Okay.
mind here.
Let's just hold that thought, though, when we do talk about the emissary, and relate it to what we've just been talking about, please.
Absolutely here.
Okay.
There's some islands approximately halfway between Norway and Iceland called the Faroe Islands. That's F like in Frank,
Yes.
A-R-O-E. Now, the inhabitants of these islands follow a gruesome ritual that involves the slaughter of pilot whales and dolphins. Would you mind going into detail with this, Patricia?
Yes, this is one of my anguishing things to talk about, but I will. This annual activity involves herding. There's a bay in the Faroe Islands where the fishermen are able to herd the pilot whales that have come in, much like they do in Talgi with the dolphins, and push these pilot whales into the inlet, or this little bay. And once they've got them all sealed in there, pushed in, and they make barriers. I suppose they use sound even to keep them in. I don't know why dolphins and pilot whales don't escape, but once they're in, these males, big studs, even boys, 12-year-old, 8-year-old boys, go out into the water in these shallow waters where these innocent beings are swimming around, frantic because they obviously know something's wrong, and they slash and cut and kill them alive. It's a much greater satisfaction to see them bleed to death while they're still alive and floundering and suffering and struggling. And the idea is to turn the bay red, which they do with the blood of these beings, and to get off on the suffering. This is something to do with their idea that they're men and they're macho. And I have seen a picture of a little 12-year-old looking boy with his knife having slit the belly of a pregnant pilot whale, and this little baby falling out dead. This is, when I see these things, I ask myself, do we wonder why good ETs have not come down to this planet?
Right.
This barbarism, and it's getting worse, where the human race is splitting. There's a wonderful growing community of spiritual people, but the barbaric group, the dark force, is getting darker. And the bloodlusting, I don't get it. I just absolutely don't get it. First of all, I'm not a man, so I don't get it for that reason. And secondly, I can't possibly imagine how anyone who has a heart pumping in their body could take pleasure out of killing an innocent, beautiful being and and making sure that it's suffering in the kill. I mean, it's one thing, and not that I justify it, but it's one thing when an Eskimo kills a whale in the old days to survive, to eat.
Right.
But to do this for fun, that is shocking. So a lot of effort is being done to intervene. Sea shepherds are out there. We're trying to raise the voice about this, but it goes on. It goes on and on. And the Faroe Islands are independent, but they are a province or somehow under the jurisdiction of Denmark.
Right.
And so I implore people to boycott Denmark, to write to the ministers, to tell them because of Faroe Islands, they will never see tourism there, and as much as possible to pressure enough that somehow we can stop this.
There's a striking parallel here because in the 1800s, I know that the American buffalo was literally hunted down for game. The American or Native Indians, they hunted buffalo too, but they prayed before making the kill. To them, the American buffalo was like a brother. And once they had killed the American buffalo, they used all parts of the animal, the meat, the fur, and everything. Now, these hunters, these cowboys, so to speak, they killed the American buffalo so much so that it was pretty much, extinct in the American plains. With what's happening in the Faroe Islands, matter of fact, if you Google the Faroe Islands, you'll see some images of some of the slaughter there, and it's graphic for some people who may not want to see these images. But it's a sad state of affairs when you're pretty much coaxing your little son to participate in a gruesome, heinous act.
Martin, I can't not also mention that we do this all the time. It's called war.
Right.
Our 17, 18-year-old boys are groomed to go to all these different countries where we're supposed to be bringing democracy and slaughter and kill everything, everybody. Look at Gaza. Look anywhere. And the slaughter never ends. And little children, there's no more rules of war where somehow killing innocent children and women was barred and only the so-called enemy was prey. But we live in a barbaric world, and this idea, this bloodlust, is not limited to these isolated events. Look at the bullfights. This is tradition that goes on in so many countries.
Mm-hmm. Right.
People sit around and watch these innocent, beautiful beasts tortured. Talk about a no-win situation. How many toreadors stick their bass? What are they? I don't even know what they're called. They're like swords, but they're not swords.
Yeah, they're like lancets, I believe.
Like lancets. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And they take great pleasure in taunting the animal and working up his fury and sticking these lancets into the animal until he's too weak to fight. And then the toreador comes in, the big stud comes in for the final kill. And all the people applaud and celebrate this. This is barbarism. So there are many displays of this barbarism still on our planet. And I think that media, I hate to get to this subject area, but I've just got to stick this in. I know it makes people uncomfortable, but I'd like to see the ending of eating animals. Perhaps when we stop eating them, we will start feeling more sympathetic that these are also life forms that need to be honored and respected.
Mm-hmm. Right. With you just mentioned the bullfighters taunting the animal before they slay the bull, so to speak. But in effect, it's pretty much an extension of the Roman circus in the days of ancient Rome, where it was the gladiator versus the tiger, or a gladiator versus the bear, or any other wild animal. And it was all viewed as a form of entertainment.
Yes, well, I mentioned that when we first started speaking.
Yeah.
Barbarism of that, and of course we've got the move in our movies. We look at this as some sort of horrific, barbaric, ancient civilization, but the truth is we do it all the time. Look at Talgi, look at Faroe Islands, look at bullfighters, look at pit bull fights.
Right, right.
Even chickens, rooster fights. I mean, come on, there is a lot of barbaric behavior on this planet that needs to be altered.
Okay. So on a lighter note, Patricia, what can people listening to this broadcast do, even on a minute scale or level, to help these cetaceans?
Well, there's so much people can do, and the first thing that they need to do is decide where they want to put their energy, because the picture is so big and very frightening, and it's very easy to lose oneself and feel like, what's the point? I'm just me. What good can I do? So to that, I tell people, start somewhere. What is your passion? Where do you feel like you could follow the passion? Are you passionate about the closing of SeaWorld? Are you passionate about cleaning up the beaches, the oceans? Are you passive but would like to help and can afford to donate some money to the organizations that are out there? I tell people, we are your warriors. We're out there. Look at Sea Shepherd. These people are out there fighting, risking their lives out on the ocean every day. And they survive only on donations. They take no political or corporate sponsors, so that they don't have any manipulation of what they're doing. So if you don't want to be on the front line, or if you don't feel comfortable putting yourself out there,
your plea to have people contribute to organizations like Sea Shepherd. So yeah, that's a perfect example of people being proactive to help these cetaceans. But okay, now we are approaching the end of the first hour here, Patricia. Would you care to mention to the listening audience of your websites and how anyone can reach you should they be interested in contacting you or perhaps ordering your books?
My main website is SyrianRevelations.net, and I also have a website, patriciacori.com, and either one of those sites will bring people all the information, how to reach me and what I'm up to, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I appreciate you taking the time here to chat with me here for the first hour, and I'll see you again for the second hour.
All righty.
Okay, thanks again, Patricia. Take care, and I'll see you again. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
That's it for the first hour on As Above, So Below Radio. Tune in for the second hour by purchasing a membership, and all for as little as $6.95 per month. Just log on to holisticadvocate.com and click on the subscribe button. In the second hour of this interview, Patricia talks about her new role as a screenwriter, as well as sharing key highlights on her latest book called The Emissary. She also imparts her perspective on how the cetaceans are working with the intelligence of water. Patricia will also discuss information concerning how the U.S. Navy plans to eliminate a vast number of sea mammals by conducting military exercises. She'll also discuss what roles we can partake in helping the plight of the cetaceans, and much more. You're listening to As Above, So Below Radio.